Hello students, this is Professor McDermott with the video recap for your Module 4 discussions. Um, the Theodore Roosevelt video, all groups had that, and I thought you all did a very nice job with that and got what you needed out of it, so we won't review those discussions, and I've already given you the important announcements you need via email, so we'll just launch into these interesting discussions that you had on the issue of Gilded Age reform. Group 1 had a segment of Jane Addams's autobiography, 20 Years at Hull House, talking about the things that were tried, some successes and some failures at Hull House in Chicago, working with the poor immigrants there. I asked for their first question, what were some of the successful experiments that they tried? Here was the answer, the group's answer posted by Sandra Connor, the chair. Of the many experiments implemented by Hull House, the public kitchen and coffee house was one of the most successful. The kitchen provided more nutritional food and a safe gathering place that promoted positive social events. It became a great central location for women, factory workers, businessmen, teachers, and students to gather at the end of the day. It was such a convenient social center that a gymnasium was added upstairs to provide a larger place for gatherings, as an alternative to bars and pubs, which could become dangerous due to alcohol consumption. Also, the gymnasium was rented out as an event space, and that provided extra earnings that could be applied to other experiments. So, yes, absolutely. This coffee house and the gymnasium were the things that really filled a need for the people in the neighborhood. Formerly, if they wanted to have a baptism or a wedding reception, they would end up going to a saloon, a bar, and that in itself caused problems, and it was also very expensive. But Hull House gave these people a place to go for gatherings like that, and they really appreciated it. But it should be said that the immigrants also did give Jane Addams and her helpers some pushback, especially with regard to the food that was being served in the kitchen, because Jane Addams thought that the best diet was the traditional American diet, meat, potato, vegetable, piece of bread. And a lot of immigrants, of course, had very different food traditions. Italians, of course, eating pasta and so forth. And so, in a way, they resisted this attempt to change their diets. And one person that Addams quoted in the article said that she was sure the food was very good, but she wanted to eat what she'd rather. And even in the gymnasium that was used for social events, they got a little bit of criticism because they wouldn't serve alcohol. Being good Gilded Age reformers, they were temperance activists too, so no alcohol was allowed. And one old guy said that it would be a very nice place to sit all day if they only served beer. Uh, so, so in any case, Addams was always coming up against the immigrants' culture. And on a more serious note, that especially took place with her attempts to improve the lives of quote-unquote fallen girls. That is, young women who had gotten into prostitution. And here, too, she came up with resistance from the immigrants based on their culture. Here's the group's answer. Another experiment that somewhat failed was the attempt to reintroduce the fallen girls into society. They attempted to place the fallen girls in schools with other nice girls and tried to find churches for the fallen girls to attend. This was all well and good until the school superintendents, the church leaders, or the parents of the nice girls learned of the fallen girls' pasts. The leaders then decided that they had to put the welfare of the nice girls first, so they would not allow the fallen girls to return. So they were able to help get the girls off the street and out of the white slave trade, but they were not very successful at implementing them back into a normal society, which is tragic. But these people were coming from European cultures where, if you had gotten into that kind of lifestyle, essentially you were dead and you were shunned permanently. And Jane Addams, being an American, thought that everybody deserved a second chance, pull themselves up by the bootstraps and so forth. But the immigrants she was working with, excuse me, usually had a very different opinion. So I think there's a couple of ways you could see Jane Addams, what she was trying to do. Um, and I asked the group, did they think that she was a real humanitarian trying to improve the lives of poor people, or was she just a busybody who wanted to change their culture? Most people seem to think that she was a true humanitarian. Um, Casey, I liked your post. You balanced this out nicely. You said, in my opinion, Jane Addams was trying to improve the lives of poor immigrants, but also she wanted to change the culture of those immigrants while doing so. She took part in establishing things for the needs and convenience of the poor immigrants. Establishing these conveniences and needs greatly improved the lives of the less fortunate. Adams states in the document, however, that there would always be a way to distinguish people like herself from people like the immigrants. She wonders if there is a way to improve their individual efforts to make the immigrants more of a superior class of people. This seems to me as if she is trying to find a way to alter the immigrants' culture. Adams knew what she had. She went out of her way and put forth effort to enhance the lives and culture of the needy in her community. So, this is a live issue nowadays. Do we accept immigrants on their own terms, or do we try to make them into Americans very assertively and insist that there is a dominant American culture that immigrants need to conform to? And I think you see that issue of today reflected very much in these documents from the past. All right, moving on to groups 2 and 3. Both 2 and 3 had readings from How the Other Half Lives, Jacob Riis's very important book about life in the slums in New York City during the Gilded Age. And I asked what were some of the problems that Riis describes, and Group 2 brought up a whole host of issues from especially the gangs that infested the neighborhoods, to the overcrowding, the lack of decent living, the lack of privacy and modesty for people, the garbage in the environment, the unclean and unsanitary environment. Group 3's reading had to do more with children, and so they pointed out the problem of overpopulation in the slums, which led to a serious epidemic of child abandonment. So mothers would often leave their children to be adopted by a group of nuns that had a little basket on their doorstep to accept unwanted children. And in extreme cases, parents would even kill their children or let them die of neglect. So these were all huge problems. Group 2, you were especially interested in this question of why didn't the police do something about this? And I think you were shocked that the police seemed to be standing by while the gangs were running rampant. And for question 2, Samantha talked about the gangs, I think very poignantly. Gangs killed innocent people and robbed anyone in any place they could. They were seen as kings if they killed a cop, and if they went to jail, they were viewed as heroes. The more problems a gang member caused, the more famous they were around the slums. And even more than that, as Shuana and Cynthia pointed out, in a sense, you had to join a gang in order to survive. And for kids, this became a way of life. In order to just even survive in the slums, it seemed almost necessary to join a gang. So why didn't the police do something? Well, I think partly they were simply overwhelmed by the magnitude of the problems, but also there was a lot of complacency and laziness, and also corruption. You had, of course, police who were on the take, getting paid off by the gangs and by the saloon keepers to look the other way. So these problems of corruption and complacency were things that the reformers really wanted to change. And Jacob Riis's friend Theodore Roosevelt, when he became police commissioner of the city of New York for a while, really worked on these problems in a very assertive way, and the policing did improve. All right, so let's see here, just a second. As far as the abandonment of children, McLean Newsom, as chair of Group 3, posted this response. One antisocial behavior committed by people of the slums is the abandonment of children. This created children having no adult supervision or a role model to look up to. Criminal behavior the people of the slums committed is theft. After reading everyone's initial posts, it seems that as if everyone agrees that the different antisocial or criminal behaviors people of the slums committed were abandonment of children, use of children in sweatshops, and theft. So these were all major social problems in the slums. And Rees describes them in such a dramatic way. It raises the question, was Rees really caring for the poor people in this situation? Or was he trying to promote fear mongering about them? And there was some difference of opinion about this in group 2. Lakin initially thought it was more contempt, while several other people thought he really cared. Justice Jones, I thought you had a nice summary. You said that you thought Rees used both methods, sympathy for the poor and fear-mongering, to serve his purpose. And, quote, the reason I say this is because the people are already poor and they can't provide for their families. It may cause some of them to become angry and bitter. And they even become angry at each other enough for them to begin to commit crimes within the city of New York. Rees wants to change the slum environment because he is tired and disgusted at seeing these poor people suffer in a hatred and murderous environment. I can understand why Rees would want to change the slum environment. Look at what it is causing the people to do to each other and to their families. I can see why he would show his disgust, fear, and contempt towards the people of the environment. And Tara, you said something similar for group 3. I believe Rees had a genuine compassion for these people, but thought the only way to break the cycle was to expose it. He did this through publishing pictures of what it was like for people living in their natural environment. This shocked several people in the upper crust as they could not fathom it. It became like a freak show in the circus. Good description. But he was able to put in motion several other people, that is, that wanted to help change their environment. So, in a way, it was a strategy by Rees to arouse compassion among his wealthy readership, but also just to inspire a little bit of fear. That if we don't do something to change the environment of these people, they might be coming after you next. They might steal your property. They might even kill you. And so, in a sense, both the compassionate approach and the fearful approach help to serve Rees's purpose and inspire people to change the environment to try to make the life better for the people in the slums. All right, that's it for this time. Good job, everyone, and looking forward very much to the current group of discussions in Module 5.